Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support the channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Welcome to a special edition of the Deconverters Bible Study. For the month of October, I will be doing a series called Spooky Bible, where I will be engaging some of the weirder, horrifying, and macabre stories of the Bible. Today I'll be dealing with the zombie horde of the New Testament, which is found in Matthew 27, 52 and 53. It reads, "Also the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many." This is also part of a greater context where Jesus is crying out. He gets to the point in the crucifixion where Jesus cries out on the cross. He gives up his spirit. He dies. And all of a sudden, all these other events begin to happen. Part of that is the temple veil is torn in two. There's an earthquake. Then we have the zombie horde here where people come out of the tombs and appear to everybody in the holy city. And then you also have the centurion saying, "Surely this was the Son of God," although that could be translated "son of a god," which is what a pagan centurion probably would have said, given his understanding of the universe. The idea that many bodies of the saint were raised and appeared to many is the main issue today, but there's a whole context of things around the death of Jesus Christ initiate a whole bunch of magical things that happen. Now, as always, I want to talk about what I felt about this passage when I was a Christian and a pastor, and then I want to talk about how I feel about it today. And then I also want to deal with, deconversion issues regarding this passage. Nothing's changed with the Deconverters Bible Study. We're just taking a little bit break from what we normally do. But when I was a Christian and a pastor, this passage was problematic on a lot of levels. Number one is the fact that despite all of these things happening, like these major events like the zombie horde and the temple being ripped into, the earthquake, and in other passages of scripture, the sun gets black, there's an eclipse. There's all kinds of things that are associated with the death of Jesus, and Matthew gives us his list of things. The problem is nearly all of these do not have any second source to them, okay? And this is particularly true with the zombie horde that we're focusing here on today. Matthew is the only gospel writer to mention the zombie horde, to mention a whole bunch of people being raised from the dead. And that seems to be that would have been a significant event that a lot of people might have mentioned in other writings, but they don't. Matthew is literally the only one that connects this idea of saints being raised from the dead at the time of Jesus' death and appearing to many. He is the only one that says that. John doesn't say that. Luke doesn't say that. Mark doesn't say that. So even the accepted canonical gospels don't say it. And I don't think any of the other gospels, at least I don't remember reading anything in the other gospels where there was this mention of this horde of people that got raised from the dead. And so from a biblical point of view, I would probably say this in my Questionable Witnesses series when I get to this passage again, there is no other witness other than Matthew himself of this event. And so even by the biblical criteria of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact being established, we don't even have that with the gospel writers on this particular event of a whole bunch of people being raised from the dead and heading into Jerusalem, the holy city, and appearing to many. Couple that with the fact that the writer of Matthew is unknown and anonymous. We really have an anonymous source telling who's the only one that tells this tale. The second thing is, even when I accepted it as a Christian theologian, theologically speaking, this also makes the resurrection from the dead a very common affair. As Christopher Hitchens points out, because of this, what this really diminishes the significance of Jesus' resurrection as a unique event and proving that he was the Son of God. If you have all these people being raised from the dead at the moment of Jesus' own death, it kind of makes resurrection from the dead apply to a lot of different people, not just Jesus Christ. If Jesus Christ was the only one that rose from the dead in all the stories, that would be one thing. But theologically speaking, we have to it kind of hits the heart of the Christian narrative that Jesus' resurrection is so significant. Well, how's it so significant? You have this whole horde of people being raised from the dead into zombies coming into Jerusalem and talking to people. You have 3 other accounts of Jesus raising people from the dead. I mean, you could say with those that there's some sort of significance in that Jesus is the one who rose from the dead. But in this case, it's Jesus' death. The only direct involvement that he has in this is that he died, and then somehow God raises all these people to life because of his death. It's problematic at that point. It's very difficult to say that the resurrection of Jesus is a unique event and proves he's the Son of God when a whole bunch of people are raised from the dead. What does that prove about them becomes the question. And so theologically speaking, I think it takes away the punch. If you accept this as true, then it takes away the punch of theologically Jesus being unique in that he was raised from the dead, and that makes him the Son of God for some reason. So we have a whole lot of people raised from the dead, so Jesus' resurrection isn't one unique one alone, standing alone, but it's just one of many. And that creates a very deep theological problem for the uniqueness of Jesus. Some of the rest of the passage that surrounds this is kind of noteworthy historically because there's no mention of it. The temple veil being ripped in two is probably the most notable. If that happened, you can bet one of the priests of the time would have made note of it, but there isn't any note of it. Some people, they would have covered that. That would have been a very difficult thing to cover up. The temple veil, if you read the description and you hear the descriptions of other people that are secular at the time, is fairly massive. And so it being ripped in two would not only be an incredible feat of strength, but it would also be something that would have been so unique that somebody would have said something and you couldn't have kept that a secret. Okay, somebody in the priesthood would have said something. It's the kind of thing that Josephus might have remarked on, but he doesn't say anything. It's an argument from silence, and I get that, but that's the problem. The silence about the temple veil being ripped, is that the releasement of the necromantic magic that causes people to rise from the dead? I've heard preachers preach that way, so maybe that's what it was, but there's no mention of it. Some of the other things happened, the earthquake and the eclipse at the same time. Possible, but that's just, that happens in real life. That doesn't have any spiritual significance. But the temple veil and the horde of zombies is kind of one of those things that would have stood out, historically speaking, and yet no mention of it. These awesome events, all tailored together, just don't work. And as a Christian, trying to justify all this stuff became very, very difficult for me when I was teaching Life of Christ in particular, because now that I look back at it, what I see the writer of Matthew doing is he's taking a lot of legendary stories about the crucifixion and the moment of Jesus' death, and he's weaving them together. He's taking all these oral traditions and he's trying to weave them together into a narrative. And because Matthew really has this agenda of trying to prove that to everybody that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah that they were looking for, and it's not Herod, it's not other people, it's him. I think he's willing, he plays very fast and loose with prophecies, the so-called prophecies of Old Testament scripture. He's like proof texting, and he's just grabbing whatever thing seems to fit his narrative of the prophecies. But I think he's also doing something very similar here, where he's willing to put any story that has been told by oral tradition to prove that Jesus is the Messiah, to give that more clout. So we're going to throw in all these people rising from the dead when he dies, the temple veil being ripped, the earthquake, all the rest of it. And so, this massive necromantic moment where Jesus dies and then provides life and these physical effects and the power that ends up happening because of the magic of Jesus' death, the necromancy of it at the moment, it really is very powerful. I think, though, looking at, that's how I kind of look at it now, that it's kind of a propaganda thing where Matthew is just adding stuff to increase his narrative that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. But now looking back at it, I think this story actually made my deconversion a little bit easier. It's so over the top and so outlandish in its nature, you kind of have to shake your head after you leave the faith and ask yourself, how in the hell did I ever believe that stuff? You know, the resurrection is one thing because it gives a lot of hope, and I guess I can understand it. But believing that a whole group of people rose from the dead at the moment of Jesus' death, and they appeared to many without any historical verification at all, and yet somehow people believe it, okay, because it's in the Bible, of course, and the Bible, you know, never gets anything wrong and never lies. You have that assumption. In the process of deconverting, it's really easy to see this kind of thing can be easily made up and just added to the story, especially when there's no verification. It goes to the issue with the Bible with most holy books, in that it is clear in some ways that the stories are edited by additions, or when the writer sits down to write things like the Gospels, he's collecting all these oral tradition stories and not giving us a source for them, where they came from. And I think what Matthew is doing here is we have all these oral traditions about the moment of Jesus' death. Well, that's a growing legend thing. You know, you get, you know, every time somebody tells the tale, they add an embellishment. And so Matthew just includes all the embellishment. And when you're deconverting, you kind of say, oh yeah, this is an embellished story. This is somebody adding to the story and making it more than more what it is. And I think that becomes abundantly clear as you're going through the process of deconversion. And then afterwards, it's like, Jesus, how did I ever believe all that crap? You know, and true with most holy books, that they're edited, that they're being put together. But I really think this is probably one of the most over-the-top parts of Jesus' death. I mean, crying out with a loud voice, yeah, sure, you know, you're dying of crucifixion, I can see. You know, it might happenstance, there might be an earthquake. The second most outlandish thing is the temple veil tearing, and then nobody talking about it afterwards. Like, there's no mention of it. I mean, that would require a massive amount of repair if you read the description of the temple veil, and somebody would have noticed. You know, there would have been a record of, you know, the priesthood ordered X amount of this cloth to rebuild the temple veil after Jesus' death, but there's no mention of it. But the whole zombie horde, the whole right after Jesus' death, everybody just kind of like sees this group of people, these saints of God that had died, appearing to everybody, the zombie horde raised from the dead at the moments of Jesus' death, just appearing is really over the top for me now. It's like, okay, you're really pushing it, aren't you, Matthew, or whoever wrote Matthew? It's like you're really pushing this narrative and you're just putting anything in there. And, you know, it really is a great necromantic moment. It's necromancy at its finest to have a main character die and then a whole bunch of other people be raised to life because of it. It's a really good moment. But as always, I'm always interested in what you have to think about these kind of passages. But I look at this now always and I just, oh, that's Jesus' zombie horde. And, you know, you have these people that are raised from the dead and walking around, and how long were they in the grave? How much decomposition took place? You know, all these questions. Who are these saints? They're not mentioned by name. Who are the many that they appeared to? You know, it's like there's this over the top, you know, storytelling here, and the writer of Matthew is very much a good storyteller at this point, telling a zombie story. And you know, he's trying to impress people, but he doesn't give us anything to hinge the story on. There's no historical account. There's no names of the saints. There's no names of the many that saw them. You know, it's just a statement, and we're just expected to believe it and just add it to the list that proves that Jesus is the Messiah. So it's kind of naive on his part to think that this is going to go beyond what it does, but, you know, there it is. But I'm always interested in what you all have to think about this story, so make sure you put what you think in the comments, any observations. I've always loved reading that stuff, no matter who it comes from, because it's always entertaining, at least, if not sometimes informative. But thanks very much for everybody for stopping by. Appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. Everything helps get the video noticed, so please do the things that YouTubers do. And I want to give a special shout out to all my members, to my citizens, Rabyd citizens, and my tribunes. Thank you very much. You guys make this worthwhile, so thank you very much for doing what you do. And as always, make sure you live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over, so make sure you're taking all your time, money, and opportunities to build up yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I mean, they'll ask you to believe in zombie hordes for real. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.